Welcome to Alpha Wolf Capital. I'm Tim, and I want to personally thank you for stopping by. Between the OTC, New York Stock Exchange, and NASDAQ, there are over 22,000 companies traded publicly. I feel that small businesses are the backbone of America. The number one reason for this channel is to help small companies gain exposure with potential consumers, investors, even partners. Take, for example, today's guest. CEO Jeb Besser from Modular Medical Devices, ticker symbol MODD. Modular Medical Devices is awaiting approval on the revolutionary insulin pump that is less cumbersome to wear, that is less expensive, and easier to manage, which you'll hear from Jeb in just a moment. Modular Medical is solving a need for those that suffer from diabetes. It's important for you to understand that this is not a paid-for promotion. I do not collect compensation for the interviews I do here. I do look for companies that could potentially provide an above-average return on investment, but that is not the primary reason for the channel. There's a thing called impact investing. It's tied to environmental, social, and governance. I think that is a very narrow definition of what impact can be. By helping a small company become a large corporation, if you and I can become ambassadors of a product because the values of that company align with our own, think of all the jobs that will be created as that small company becomes a big company. Think about the community that that company is in. Typically, they thrive along with the company. This channel is to help companies that are relatively unknown become known so that they can build a following and they can have brand ambassadors that share their vision, share their mission, and are willing to do what they can to help have a positive impact on humanity. That's what this channel is all about. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. I recommend highly that before buying any security, you speak to a financial advisor and do your own due diligence. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Capital coming at you with a follow-up update that for some may feel as though it's been too long, but there's been some recent announcements from Jeb Besser and Modular Medical. Not the announcements that I think everybody is waiting with bated breath for, but that's okay, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Jeb,
Just trying to keep you on your toes. That's all.
Yeah, you're doing a good job, man. So real quickly, for those that maybe are thinking that they would have expected or anticipated news on the pump, why don't you give us a quick snapshot and update of where you are in the FDA process?
So yes, obviously our core product is still our MODD1 insulin pump targeted at this underserved market of almost pumpers, who are among the 8 out of 10 people who should be wearing a pump for better clinical benefit, but aren't 30 years after the introduction of a pump for some reason or another. And those reasons usually are some combination of cost, complexity, and cumbersome form factor of the existing products, of which there are only 3 major ones, and they've been the same 3 since 2011. So remember that this is a predicate device application, and there are no human trials allowed. So obviously that hasn't changed. And we submitted our application for clearance to the FDA on January 19th. On March 15th, we got our first set of questions. We have 180 days to answer those questions, or we time out and go back to 0. And that date is September 11th. So I'll say it's now July 16th, and we are highly confident that we will respond before September 11th. In fact, I would venture to say we'll respond significantly before September 11th. And that's obviously within our control to some extent. And once we respond to this first set of questions, the agency has 30 days to respond with their second set of questions or simply to clear us. I think given that our initial application was 22,000 pages, it's likely that there are going to be a few clarifying questions. But since the agency's already had plenty of time to review the initial application and already took their first shot at asking us about, physical tests and other things that they asked us about in the first set of questions, our hope is that this second set is more of a clarifying set of questions. But there's no hard and fast rules for this, so we'll see what the agency has to say. But once we get that second set of questions, we'll have a very good sense as to where we are in terms of getting cleared. And that will both determine what kind of capital runway we need, and it will also determine, what we're going to do as far as strategics, because as I've said many times publicly, once we get that second set of questions, we're going to hire a banker and see what the strategics think of our platform as far as is this something I'd buy when we get cleared? Is this something I'd buy if I see you get a few thousand customers? Or is this something I would never buy and I dare you to come after me, which we're not afraid of either. So because we don't directly compete with them, we think we're going after a different set of users that they've ignored for many, many years.
Right.
So that's where we are with the FDA process. The only other thing that I think is worth noting is, March 15th was some time ago. So why is it taking us so long to respond to these questions? And what I would say is the amount of time it's taking us to respond is not necessarily correlated to what we believe to be the overall technical difficulty of answering these questions. If a question required us to do pre-treatments or conditioning of the product, those treatments can take as long as 2 months. And you can either fight the agency on why would we have to do that, or you can just do it. And I think, as you might imagine, fighting City Hall is not a good idea. And, the FDA reviewers have good reasons for asking all of their questions.
Right.
Those reasons might be more relevant to a syringe-based pump, since every pump that's on the market right now is syringe-based, and ours is a linear peristaltic pump, which pumps in a fundamentally different way. But I can see why they would ask some of the questions they've asked about syringe pumps, and therefore, I think we're, the FDA reviewers are not mechanical engineers. They're there to ensure the safety of the consumer and the efficacy of medical products that are on the market. And so, we're answering the questions as best we can, and then we look forward to seeing what other questions they have. But we're going to take it as seriously as we possibly can.
Could we fairly say that there was nothing in the questions that was alarming in any way?
I would say that as we understand the questions, because part of the game here is to understand and interpret exactly what the questions were,
Yeah.
I would say that the questions were well within the range of our expectations going in.
Okay.
In terms of things that I could see them asking about, and things that I think were fairly straightforward and clear from the filing, they seem in large part to have agreed with.
Okay. Let's fast forward to and I found this interesting because you had what I would call a strategic hire.
Yes. You mean when we hired Steve Gemmell?
Correct.
Yes. Our new VP of engineering. Yes. Steve is a great hire. Steve was head of R&D for Insulet for 5 years. He was head of device at Onduo after that, which is Sanofi and Google's diabetes targeted joint venture. He's a very, very well-respected guy in this space. And, I think the only thing I would say is that we hired him, or he agreed to join the company. We announced his hire a week and a half after we got our FDA questions. So
that he had an opportunity to review those questions.
He did have an opportunity to evaluate what the FDA was asking us, and that didn't dissuade him from joining us. So yes, he left his lucrative consulting gig to take options and join us. And, as head of R&D at Insulet, he's seen lots of these sets of questions. So, I can't speak for him, but I can just tell you how he voted with his feet, which is that he joined us for options and as a full-time employee. after those questions were received.
After he saw those questions. So
yeah, and I'll also say that his expertise is in the stuff you would do after you commercialize, which is to integrate your device with everything else under the sun in diabetes land, be it Livongo, Dario, Dexcom, Libre, anything else any other part of the universe of products that you can be integrated with in order to make things easy for you as a patient. And he's good at lots of things, but that is his core expertise,
right,
in our opinion, in terms of our product.
So for me, just breaking it down, looking at it objectively, here is a guy that is a seasoned veteran within the industry, has seen more than his fair share of questions on new devices and stuff like that. And him deciding after seeing the questions that he's going to leave his lucrative gig and come join you guys, that to me is a very positive sign.
I think it's a good sign, and I think it's also a sign that he looked at our device as submitted to the FDA and said, this is different enough from what I used to work on, that there's a place for this in the market, even though Insulet is a $16 billion market cap player and this company's 50 million.
Okay. All right. So that's another, in my opinion, that's another good piece. We're getting closer to September 11th. So let's say you do get a second set of questions, right?
Assume we're going to get a second set. Given the 22,000 page filing, I would say I rate the chances of us not getting a second set are like sub 5%.
But I would say that or maybe I'm wrong, but the second set of questions, like you said, is more just clarification. Would be more clarification, not necessarily, dropping the bomb, right?
They definitely know a lot more about our product, right? Like they've had plenty of time to digest the original filing. They'll have the answers to their first set of questions. There's no hard and fast rule though with the agency. There's no, if you decide that you're going to not take them seriously in answering the first set of questions and be thorough and professional and mindful of the fact that they're there to protect the public safety, they can drop an anvil on your head. There's nothing to stop them from doing that.
Right.
It's just, I would just say we're taking a lot of care in the way that we answer their first set of questions. And if they had major questions about the basics of our product, they had an opportunity to ask them before. Right. So that would be surprise, not impossible, but surprise. So the hope would be that we could respond to a second set of questions much faster, but we won't know until we see them.
Okay. Let's talk about capital needs. Now, you already said that, once you get that second set of questions and you have a better scope of where you're at, you've also indicated you would look to hire a banker and then go start talking to people like Medtronic or whoever, right?
I think there are a bunch of strategics who either could or should have an interest. Certainly Medtronic is one that comes to mind because they tried to buy EOFlow for $740 million and then ended up not consummating the deal. So that seemed to me to be an admission that they thought there was a hole in their product portfolio as far as a patch pump for insulin delivery.
Right.
But people buy companies for lots of different reasons. So I think we owe it to ourselves and our investors to see what the interest level is, because if you don't see what's out there in the field in terms of how can you ever know what your relative risk, reward, and rate of return on invested capital is? Right. I had a boss a long time ago who said, Jeb, your rate of return is inherently a subset of the ideas you look at. If we don't talk to the strategics at this point and understand what they might pay for us on clearance, if we got a few thousand customers, or, after we've run the business for a few years, we'll never, how would we possibly assess our cost of capital and what our needs are going forwards?
Right. All right. So I think it's important to highlight the fact that, Jeb, you are a capital market. You're an investor in stocks, right?
Actually, the fund that I run is the biggest shareholder.
Right.
Yes. So and I make $1 doing this. So as CEO, so I'm not incented to stick around for the salary. I think we're 100% aligned with the shareholders in terms of shareholder return is everything here.
Right,
Um, and I think, and there's never been a cleared pump company that didn't have a $300 million market cap after clearance
right,
in the public market. So, I think one of the reasons we haven't raised a huge boatload of capital is that capital is really expensive for us right now. And I would hope that it would be a lot cheaper if we are successful in getting cleared.
right.
And I think the other reason that the second set of questions is a good time to go out and talk to strategics is I think the feedback from the strategics that we've, had sort of any kind of preliminary discussion with has been very consistent. Any strategic, and the VP of Biz Dev and any strategic is going to want three things in order to minimize their risk around a partnership or an acquisition of a product like ours. They're going to want to see that the product's differentiated. I think we're good to go on that. They're going to want to see freedom to operate. And I think our product, because it pumps differently than all the other pumps in the space, and you can't patent pumping insulin anymore because that ship sailed a long time ago. I think we have broad freedom to operate. They want to see scalability in manufacturing. And when we move our manufacturing line to Mexico, they'll be able to see it in a tier 1 facility, ready to scale at very reasonable capital costs relative to everyone else in the space. And
Right.
finally, they're going to want to see FDA correspondence indicating we are going to be clear or are very likely to be cleared because, there are cautionary examples of products taking a really long time to get cleared in the space.
Right.
So I think we have to check those boxes before we run any kind of a preliminary process. And honestly, just because I think that every one of our competitors would have a need for a product like ours in their portfolio doesn't mean that they're necessarily ready at the moment that we want them to be ready to do something. So, we're going to check it out. I don't ever want someone to think that the fact that we're going to contemplate monetizing this is an indication that we're afraid of our differentiation and our go-to-market strategy, because we're not.
Right.
We're absolutely not.
And I think to prove that fact, that you just had another announcement that I thought was very interesting about the GLP-1.
Yes. Using a proof of concept study in rodents at Gubra to ascertain whether or not there's an opportunity to use a already approved GLP-1 molecule in our pump. And incidentally, in our existing platform with no real and significant engineering changes. So yeah, and obviously we think that's a big deal potentially to explore because it would more than double our addressable market.
Could you give everybody like a brief summary of what GLP-1? So a lot of people I know are probably aware of it because there's a lot of people that are out of shape that need to lose weight, and this is like the miracle cure supposedly for some, right? And for others, there is actually, for quite a bit of others, there are some side effects that are just not necessarily worth tolerating to lose 20 pounds.
I think that look, I mean, some of the hype is justified here, and that these seem to be more effective weight loss drugs with less hair on them than anything that's come in the past. And it just happens that this class of drugs came from managing type 2 diabetes, and it's very effective at managing blood sugar. And that's where the category came from. And so, look, when we think about the application of a pump in this market, if you can lose 20% of your body weight taking a once a week shot, and that feels great to you, there's no way in heck you're going to wear a pump. I get that, and I don't want anyone to see this announcement and think, oh well, we think we're going to go head to head with the Lilly and Novo marketing machine and start buying TV ads to try and encourage people to use a pump instead of take a shot once a week. Or once a month, or whatever it's going to be when all these other molecules come out and they continue to lengthen the time that someone can be on therapy. However, what people don't talk about, and what we alluded to in our press release, is according to Blue Cross Blue Shield, 35% of the patients that go on a GLP-1 weekly injection drop the therapy within 4 weeks. 50% drop within 12 weeks. And there's another study from a different insurer that says that only 1 out of 7 patients is on therapy after 2 years. If you go off therapy, you actually, generally speaking, you gain all the weight back. And and you lose a mix of muscle and fat and you gain back fat. So maybe that isn't a great outcome. But I also think we're in this Goldilocks period here where the major players here desperately want this covered for everything, because insurance gives you a hard time about getting reimbursed on, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds. And so they're trying to study it in Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's, in osteoarthritis, et cetera. And look, there might be very good application in all of those spaces. There's a lot of clinical data being thrown at it right now. I'm not really sure how that's all going to play out. But what I will say is, for the base market of managing blood sugar and obesity in people with type 2 diabetes, the dropout rates are significant. And they happen, one, because of cost sometimes, but mainly because of the associated tolerability effects on the GI side and the lack of efficacy for some people in terms of appetite suppression in the back half of each week. And so that's probably because the PK curve for all these products looks like this. And this is when you get the side effects and the GI side effects. And this is when you're not getting the good hunger suppression. And so, that's not for, a lot of people tolerate it. And, you might talk to your neighbor who says, I've never experienced any of that. I feel, I've lost 20 pounds and I feel great. And to them, I say, just like people who use a mini med and know all the interfaces and love all the algorithms, good for you. You're getting great care. I'm happy for you. However, for all those people who have tolerability issues, if you believe that these drugs all basically work the same way, they just hammer the GLP-1 receptor constantly, and that's what causes the effect, the differentiation between one and the other is not that great. You might get a little bit more bioavailability, a little bit more weight loss, but not huge differences. And so if it's a class effect, is there an opportunity to put a GLP-1 in a pump so that you get a mechanical leveling of the dosage, right? So you don't have that peak that causes the GI side effects early. You get the satiety all week long. And if near the end of the week, you're starting to have problems with it, you just push the button to bolus on top and you get suppression around meals, better suppression around meals, and better effect on the postprandial. And that's what we want to study. So it's a non-responder population. So we don't think that you don't have to beat Mounjaro. You don't have to beat Ozempic. You don't have to be better than those things. You just simply have to be more tolerable and have a better effect than the old weight loss drugs and less side effect profile than bariatric surgery, which isn't a very high bar either. And do it at a cost point where you can afford to bundle in the pump too. Which and obviously that's not by using Ozempic or Mounjaro or one of the other long actings that's in development. And you wouldn't want to use the long acting in a pump anyway, because if you use the long acting in a pump every time you on Monday you bolus, that's in your system for another week. Right. On Tuesday you bolus, it's in your system for another week. So you'd just be constantly stacking doses. So the current long acting formulations are a bad fit for a pump, but there's an already approved short acting that's in your system for less than an hour after you deliver it, that is in the same class, but it was always studied as a multiple daily injections therapy. So it was never in your system for more than a couple hours a day, which is why its weight loss claim is de minimis. And and because it was the first drug in the class, it has a terrible label as far as the GI side effects, because it was the first drug in the class and they thought it was novel and specific to that drug rather than a class effect. If I gave you a 60-page questionnaire and I said, tell me about all the different ways that you are having GI difficulties today, you might check off a lot of boxes. And it might be because you ate Mexican last night. I mean, it could be anything, right? However, However, if I told you, you know what, you're going to go on Ozempic and you're probably going to feel nauseous for the first day or two, but that's transitory. And by the time you get to your second shot, you'll be used to it and it's all good. That's going to minimize things in your mind. And you're probably not going to report the same kind of GI side effects. So so we think there's an opportunity to both improve satiety and potentially, if you use a combination of a basal and a bolus, deliver the same load of drug and get hopefully the same effects or similar effects, because we don't have to be better than them. And I don't think we even have to equal them, frankly, in order to be an appealing solution for a subset of non-responders who still want the effects, right? Maybe we can get away with a much lower basal and just bolus around noons. And it just happens that the accuracy you need in dosing this molecule is very similar to insulin, and the amount of volume that you need to deliver of drug that you need to deliver matches with our current pump. So really no changes in the pump design necessary, and no change in materials either. And this is a really important point because we've designed our pump from the beginning to be pre-fill capable. So that's perfect, ideally. That's perfect, ideally, for us to partner with a pharmaceutical company who invested in one of these earlier molecules and looks at it and says, wow, my investment is toast. No one's using my multiple times a day shot when they can just do one single injection a week. But I have all this manufacturing capacity. I've invested IP, litigation time, if it was an ANDA filer, et cetera, in being able to commercialize this. And I have a dedicated manufacturing facility and I have no market. Maybe there's some way I can salvage that if I partner and target non-responders. And like Morgan Stanley estimates that this space will be $150 billion in 5 years. What kind of non-responder penetration do you need to get in order to have this be an interesting market for a pharmaceutical company as a partner? And I would say the answer is 1 or 2%.
I think that's reasonable.
So look, this is not a distraction for us. It's no change in the existing design. We're having the research done at the gold standard facility for testing these things. I mean, Gubra is literally next door to Novo Nordisk and has 250 employees, and metabolic studies are all they do. So they're a tier 1 player because we like working with tier 1 players, and their results will be very credible to anyone that we show them to in order to, seek a partnership, because we're clearly not a drug company and we're not going to take this all the way ourselves. So is it early? Yeah. But, there are other groups that have studied the effect of this peptide given as a basal, and they've seen similar weight loss effects in their rodent studies to the long-acting weekly GLP-1s. So, and once again, we don't have to be better. I don't think we even have to be as good. Just have to be better than whatever else you were going to do.
Right. So I guess this, to sum it up for me, if there were genuine concerns on your camp's end about whether or not your pump was going to get approval, I don't think you would be sitting there looking for other ways to use that pump.
I think you're probably thinking about that the right way. I think if we thought there was a major redesign coming based on the initial on the feedback we've gotten from the FDA so far, we probably wouldn't be working on this.
Right.
The value of this as a platform is not, well, we couldn't get it cleared for insulin and now we can't get it cleared for something else too. It's, if we get cleared for insulin, here's something else that you can immediately do with this, explore with this technology. And look, this is not, filling an insulin pump with another drug is not a novel idea either. Insulet derives something like, between 5 and 10% of their revenue from Neulasta Onpro, which is their existing pump that they sell to Amgen, who fills it up with Neulasta and gives to patients.
Right.
As a delivery mechanism. And we think they make really good money doing that. And given that the average reimbursement for a GLP-1 is more than $1,000 a month, and our projection in terms of our revenue per year from the pump is a little more than $4,000 for insulin, to deliver insulin, there's plenty of room there for a pharmaceutical company to make really good money, even if they're giving our pump away for free.
Right. All right. So I want to go back to the capital issues for a moment, right?
Yep.
You raised 10 million.
Yep.
Uh,
That's right. In February.
Part of that raise is for if you can make if you by manufacturing, if you can cut out some costly items and increase your margins, then that's something you're going to do, right?
Well, I'll try saying that another way.
Go ahead.
I'll say what we were not going to spend the money on under any circumstance was building out a big sales force in advance of clearance. Because what if we aren't even marketing it? Like, no acquirer or partner would pay a multiple for us to have a sales force that they would then have to get rid of, because they would surely already have their own commercial infrastructure and plans, right? So we're not going to spend money on that. So all capital right now goes to the engines and the wings, which are the FDA process and standing up the manufacturing line. One, because it's critical to finding a partner, and two, because it's a major differentiator in terms of credibility, because there are lots of pumps that are cleared elsewhere in the world, which will never be cleared in the US and will never have any positive gross margins or scale, because they're made by hand and they're just fundamentally not a scalable design. That's supposed to be a credible manufacturing product. So what I will spend money on incrementally, if I see an opportunity to, are relatively low dollar value, long lead time CapEx expenditures that will increase my margins and my throughput at launch or shortly thereafter. And I think any acquirer or partner would value that and pay a multiple for that. And look, it's good business sense for us too. It's not just for a partner, right? Like that. And the sooner we can get more throughput and more margins and lower costs, the more penetration we should be able to get profitably in the early going. And cost is a differentiator in this space. And no one has tried to use it as a differentiator, and we absolutely plan to. So and I guess news that we're spending more money on CapEx should also give an investor, perversely, a little bit of comfort that we think the FDA process is at least going within the range of our expectations, because if it's us shortening our runway, right? So we have to be confident that, either that we have other capital available or at a reasonable cost, or that it's worth it to us, because we think that commercialization is close enough in that those are worthwhile expenditures, if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
But you asked about capital resources. So we have $4 million available on our ATM. If you go back and look at our history, we tapped our ATM for 2 days after we submitted, and then we decided, you know what, there's not enough volume here, so we did the deal with Titan, and that was a pure common deal that was up 50%.
It was a clean deal, no warrants attached,
no warrants, no nothing, 3 times oversubscribed, and the deal was up 50% after we priced it. 2 days after we priced it. So I think it was well placed. I think we got some great holders out of that exercise, and I think what I'm hopeful of is that as we get closer and closer to clearance, the discount between us and all our historical and current peers starts to narrow, and when that happens, our cost of capital goes down, and then it makes sense for us to pull some money off the ATM, and given that ATM sold stock is a 3% discount to market, for us, that's I'm probably not going to do any better than that in any kind of banked process, honestly. But if the volume isn't there, we'll do it as a bolus at some point when it's appropriate, when we've delivered on the things that we promised. And I promised that we would put in a credible submission when we did the February deal, and that we would get FDA questions that I thought would be manageable, and that we would respond to them in a timely fashion. And so hopefully, and we'll have clarity on that second set of questions. So hopefully, if we have to take down a bolus of cash, it'll be after that second set of questions, when we have a lot more de-risking that's been done, and we've delivered a lot more. So that's our plan. And if there's a day where the stock trades up 10x, I'll take the whole $4 million down, because I have good use for it. But hoping for that is not really a plan, but you have to be prepared. But for those that are worried that I'm going to take the ATM and I'm going to beat 20 to 30% of the volume bleeding every day and raining fire on the stock, for $20,000 or $30,000 a week, that's not going to happen. I think hopefully the one thing we've shown in Manchester's tenure as part of the executive team at this company, instead of just being on the board and being a passive investor, is that we are very, very aligned with shareholders, and we are aware of the ways that ATMs and other instruments can be misused, and we've tried to avoid doing those things.
Right. Okay. I think this is an exciting time, right? For
very excited. I mean, getting that first set of questions. I mean, after our pre-sub meeting with the FDA, that's really the first opportunity we've had to see what they actually thought of our product, and I think it was within the range of our expectations, which is very exciting.
So let's say you get, the second set of questions, and it's really just clarification type stuff, right? How much does that? How much interaction is there between the two organizations? Does this really start to narrow, like, to a couple of days where you get back and forth?
So technically, when you get that second set of questions, you have 180 days to respond, just like the first. Okay. And the reason they do that is if there's a question in there that requires some kind of major aging, reliability, biocompatibility, insulin stability type testing, which just takes months.
Right.
Hopefully that won't happen. And so, but we don't get to interact with them on a regular basis until we respond to that second set of questions, aside from one clarification call. So, but once we respond to that second set, the agency is supposed to talk to us every day or every couple days in an interactive fashion to, quote, clear, and this is right from the regs, to clear us with the least commercial burden possible. So when we know we're in a position to respond to that second set of questions, we're kind of on the rocket docket.
Right.
I think if there's a real hairball, it's going to be in that second set. It was, I don't think it was in the first.
And if you get it, once you do answer the first set of questions, you're not going to make a public announcement about that. You're just going to.
No, there's no upside to us doing that. If you follow most med device companies that I follow, don't even tell you the level of granularity that I've given people on when you got your response or when you got your questions and when you responded to them. They just say, we're in the process and we're not going to say anything more. I feel like investors deserve a little bit more than that, but I think anything other than just the facts is a mistake. And you don't ever want the reviewer to feel like you've slighted them in some way. These questions are too easy. These questions were too hard. I just want people to know that the FDA is a good partner and they're hitting their statutory timelines, and we are too. And so, I'll just tell you, the only thing we're going to do is we're going to update the deck that we have in the investor section of our website. I believe it's slide, hold on, I'll tell you exactly. Wait. Slide 17.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd suggest, if you want to track when we responded to the questions, I would just check slide 17 every morning.
Right.
That's obnoxious, right? Why won't you put on an 8K and make my life easy? Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just telling you, we're not going to do that. So you can just have it on your, you can have Chat GPT check slide 17 every morning and tell you what's changed. and one day there'll be a date there.
Yep.
And then you'll know when you have that date that the FDA owes us a response within 30 days.
Right. Within 30 days of that.
30 calendar days. Yep.
Got it.
It could be sooner. Could be sooner.
So let's, I want to briefly go over, I want to move your, so, here's my take. If you are not familiar with Modular Medical, this would be a really good time to put these guys on your radar. And you can go to their website, sign up for their IR for their email alerts, and then anytime they have news that does come out, that will get sent directly to your email. And instead of having to go search to find out why is MODD moving this morning, you'll have it in your inbox, right? I want to move. I want to move your logo for a second here and just take a look at the chart, because I think the chart, is interesting as well. Um, actually has kind of been in a bull flag formation for a while. And it looks like you just had a recent test, but I don't really care about where a stock travels throughout a day. What I care about is where it closes, right? That's always the most important thing. And I think that's important.
I can actually speak to that.
Yeah.
I think the sell-off on that one day, it happened to correlate exactly with the day that we filed a one-page prospectus supplement,
Okay.
which was required by Leerink's attorneys to reactivate the ATM. And I think that flashed up on a whole bunch of screens as, oh, looks like these guys are doing a big deal, because the prospectus supplement is associated with a $60 million shelf,
Right. Okay.
which by the way we can only use 4 million of. So but we couldn't do the refresh and use the ATM again until we filed our 10K.
Got it.
So I think somebody saw that flash and fat fingered a let's get out of this thing. These guys are about to do some horrific deal, but no, in fact, no stock was being sold, and no deal is coming like that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Retail investors too. I mean, as soon as they see some kind of a filing, even if it is just an update to keep whatever, immediate panic. Oh my God, they're going to do a big cap raise.
I get it. And look, I have the same fear. I live in fear of that same thing in my portfolio, beyond MODD. But I'll just say, I share the fear and I share the aversion to doing bad things.
So I think that's why it's important to take a look at the chart. This candle right here, the one you're talking about, where, I mean, it was a pretty big volume day, right? It definitely had a pretty decent sized drop. But this is why I say it matters where something closes, right? If you would have closed below $1.27, I would have bet that would have been to me, it would have been a flag to a lot of technical people, right? That the upward trend that you've established over these last almost a year now, it had been broken, right?
Yeah.
It would be like clear break. Now these guys are starting a new trend down, right? That didn't happen. You didn't close below there. And you're actually sitting in an area that is, I think you've got some pretty good support right around about a buck. I want to say $1.50, right? It seems like you've got pretty good support there. The area of resistance overhead is $2. I mean, that is your, if you can break through that glass ceiling, and that becomes now that one becomes your support area. This is a nice stair step formation up. It's a very, very healthy action. And fundamentally, if you look at what's coming up, things are kind of aligning. What I would say right now is you're coiling with inside a box, right? I mean, if you just draw a big box around these candles here, you're testing between 120 or 130 and $2, essentially. Right? That's where you're trading. Once you break out of that, one direction or the other, I think it gets really interesting, because the bigger the base, typically the higher the space, right? That's the technical jargon. And I think that's what we're shooting for, right?
Look, I haven't been at this for as long as I have, wearing the executive hat, to monetize this thing for $2.
Well,
I'm not saying that can't happen, but I'm just saying that would make me very unhappy.
Yeah. Getting paid $1 to do that.
Yeah. Yes, that would be it. That we would call that a bad use of my time. And a bad use of your viewers' time watching me talk about it happen.
I happen to agree with you, and I just don't think that is your style, Jeb.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
I think you have much bigger ambitions. Real quickly, just you have said even if you were to commercialize this on your own, right? The endo space has a very limited amount of doctors that actually prescribe pumps, right? So it's not
Right.
like you have to hire this massive sales force to cover who you need to cover.
Oh yeah, I love these numbers because they're so instructive as to how much of an opportunity this is and how hard it is to write the current products. There are only 4,000 endos who see patients in the US, even though 1 out of every 4 healthcare dollars in the US is spent on diabetes related issues. And of those 4,000 endos, only 1,500 have ever written a pump 30 years after they were introduced.
Right.
And of those 1,500 endos, 80% of the pump scripts come out of 1,000 of them. And of those 1,000 endos, really the driver of which pump they pick is the nurse diabetes educator or certified pump trainer, depending on what they're calling themselves right now, who is usually attached 5 to 10 different endos in a given market. So there are only 250 to 300 of those practices in the United States. Those people, we have to convince that we're a credible option. I don't want to be the, I don't need to convince them that, who's rolling off their 4-year mini med warranty, who wants to switch to T-Slim. I need to be there for the patient who comes in, who's been coming in for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and says no, no, no to my competitors. And so the nurse diabetes educator is left with, well, try harder, be smarter, make better choices, or how about this? This might fit your lifestyle better. This might be easier. You might be able to, you can take this home and take a sample home and try this. And, you can probably learn how to use it in about 20 minutes. That's market number one. And then the other market is the other 2,500 endos who won't write the current pumps because they know how much work it is. And the 20% of people who require daily insulin who are still seen by their PCP because there isn't an endo in their area, or their condition isn't perceived to be bad enough yet for them to switch to an endo, and the PCP is still trying to hold on to them. And by the way, that 4,000 number of endos, that number is dropping. The average endocrinologist in the United States makes $115,000 a year. You want to pick a specialty where you can't pay your med school loans? Pick endocrinology. And so they tend to be older. They tend to not be very tech forward. Look, there are always exceptions to these rules, right? But that is the base profile, and there tend to be less and less of them. When I talk to our competitors' salespeople, they're like, I just lost a territory basically because the guy who wrote all my scripts in X geographic area just retired, and there's no one replacing him or her.
That's rough.
So look, actually, the head at the American Diabetes Association meeting, the head of the FDA went in and said the future of diabetes treatment is by pushing care out to the primary care physician, because there just aren't going to be enough endos to manage all these people. And I agree, but no endo is going to write a pump with 1,300 user configurable features that takes a week of training. That
comes with the salesperson. It's not like you can order one and test it out on your own. You have to have somebody there, right?
Oh, if you play with a pump and set it wrong, you can die. It requires multiple days of in-person training.
Right.
That's the standard. That's the standard right now. So we want to change that paradigm. And I always go back to the base analogy of, look, the current pumps are a great approximation of that $2,000 latte machine. Makes a great cup of coffee if you spin all the knobs and pull all the levers just right for you. But most people have a Keurig because they're getting 80 to 90% of the benefit for 10% of the work, depending on how much of a coffee snob you are.
Do you have the device with it?
I do. So our device is this cartridge, which lasts for 3 days, comes with the battery, which is on this one has fallen off because I only get the factory rejects. And these cost us a lot right now because we're making them by hand in California. And so this lasts for 3 days, comes with the set. It's 12 molded plastic pieces and a coin cell battery. And then we give you this for free. This is your controller. This has the button on it. Everything you need to do to manage this pump, you can do with this button. You can use a cell phone app to see whether or not the pump is on, to see whether or not you just bolused yourself. Hey, you might want to do that again for a little while. And you put the two things together with about the complexity of a McDonald's Happy Meal. Fill it up with insulin, which you buy yourself separately because all current pumps require you to buy the insulin separately. Even though, as I said, ours are made with a kind of plastic we think is ideal for pre-fill, either for insulin or for another molecule, like a GLP-1. So put them together, right?
Yeah.
You slide this in place, you click it into the adhesive pad, you click the set on top of where the set is mounted on your arm, and away you go. 12 steps every 3 days. Contrast that to Medtronic, which has 42 steps every 3 days.
Huh.
And two of our steps are wash your hands and is the light up.
Right. Those are pretty simple. Not a whole lot. You don't have to do any calculations or any settings. It's just.
So the basal is set by your doctor. And the amount of insulin that's delivered with each push of the bolus button is set in consultation with your doctor. And so that's 99% of the complexity that we're eliminating for you. Now you might say, well, gee, that seems really limiting. And I would say, in terms of clinical care, and I would say, just getting someone a basal drip for 50% of their insulin all day long is an enormous clinical benefit. And there are hundreds of studies that say the ability to push a button on your arm or through your clothing means that you will bolus more frequently and in smaller amounts than if you have to excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and stab yourself at lunchtime. And so a lot of people just won't even do that, right? They won't take their needle set with them. They just won't do it. So the ability to bolus mechanically through your clothing in a simple, discrete fashion, and the ability to get half your insulin through a basal drip is in of itself an enormous clinical benefit that will help you a lot.
Right.
If you're poorly managed right now. Look, you're always going to find exceptions, right? You're going to find someone who's like, has eaten the same thing for 30 years and gives themselves, 1 or 2 shots a day and obsessively checks their CGM and is doing it all with needles, and they're in the low 6s. And once again, I say good for them. And good for someone who uses every different insulin delivery profile on their mini med and gets and has a number in the mid 5s. Which is, practically a person without diabetes. But that's not everyone.
Right.
And most people aren't willing to put in the 30 to 60 minutes a day to achieve that. And that's not our target market, right? But that market has a huge voice at the academic centers. Like someone who comes into Stanford Medical Center and says, I want a pump. Like if you ask the endocrinologist there, what are your patients like and what are they looking for? Like, well, they're all super tech savvy. They're all well insured. They're hyper motivated. They want better and better care.
Right.
I think if you ask that same question of an endocrinologist in Bowling Green, Ohio, you're probably going to get an answer like, I have a lot of patients who just want to get a good result, a decent result without doing an enormous amount of work because they're already so overburdened by their disease.
Yeah.
And that's fine because diabetes is a disease of everyone, right? So that's where was I going with it? Oh, so the only other thing I need to say about that is before you think that all current pump users use all of these features, even though they spend an inordinate amount of time managing their pump, there's a great study that the ADA did, and there's another one in Germany which showed the exact same thing, which is that 45% of all current pump users have never changed their basal rate. So they are not using 99% of the functionality in their device. They are using exactly what we would give you. So if you buy my contention that the 20% of people who adopted pumps to date out of the population that could use them is the most motivated, most technically sophisticated, best insured of the bunch in general, if half of them aren't using all these features, I don't think the next 10% care. Most of them. Few of them will, but not most of them.
Right.
And that's really where we play and see an opportunity to add a huge amount of benefit. And The only other thing that's sort of new since the last time we talked that I think is worth mentioning is, we've got some recent data from Europe that talks about penetration of the different kinds of devices, right? Because as we've discussed many times, a continuous glucose monitor and a pump are two things that you have to wear all the time in order to get better results managing your diabetes. And so, but the number of people who are willing to wear a CGM is 4 times as great as a pump, because there are simpler, easier to use options out there with the CGM, right? So a lot of people dismiss that and either say, oh, well, there's something special about a CGM versus a pump. Okay, I mean, there are differences, but but the other thing they say is, well, it's just because it's pure cost. Pumps are just really expensive. And if you could just address the expense issue, that would be it. Well, the problem with that thesis is that in Europe, where you have myriad different reimbursement schemes, right? In Germany, it's largely like the US in terms of private pay with a few weird quirks. In other countries, it's a pure tender. Some countries, it's a combination of a tender and private. Like, it's all over the map, right? But in basically every country in Europe, the ratio of CGMs to pumps is 4 to 1, just like in the US. It's an amazing control that tells you that it's not all about the reimbursement. Reimbursement's important, but it's not all about the reimbursement. It's something fundamental about the way that CGMs are designed today versus the complexity of the current options that are available for you if you want to go on a pump. So we want to move the pump market closer to the CGM market, and maybe we can close some of that gap.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is, I try to focus on companies that can have a positive impact on quality of people's lives, right? And I think anybody that has diabetes that has to deal with this type of thing has an option that they haven't had before that is simpler and all around, I think, is a safer, simpler, and easy to use. I think this is an absolute need. It's not something that people necessarily recognize as a need right now, but I think that as the benefits of what you're offering start to get out there, I absolutely think this thing will take off like wildfire.
I think the Abbott Freestyle Libre 1 proved when they were introduced in 2016, and within 5 years caught Dexcom in terms of the number of users. For a Libre user who adopted them early on, even though the product wasn't as accurate as a Dexcom, the lack of features were features.
Yeah.
That is just as true for a certain category of pump user.
Right. Cost.
For some people, managing their diabetes is their life. And for other people, managing their diabetes is just something they want to interact with occasionally.
Right.
But those people still deserve better care. They deserve better care than what we're giving them. And I don't want to get on the soapbox here too much, but the fact that pumps have been around for 30 years with the opportunity to provide people with better care, and 8 out of 10 people who could benefit from wearing them still aren't wearing one. I mean, to me, that's kind of failure for the industry in terms of impacting enough of the population to make lives better.
Just out of curiosity, size wise, I mean, that thing looked pretty damn small to me.
Yeah. So how big is it? So here's my hand. Here's the device. Let's put it on top of my hand. Just, of course, you don't know how big my hand is, but here it is relative to a Samsung Z Fold 3.
Right.
Or probably most important of all, here's the Insulin Omnipod that everybody seems to like the form factor on and seems to be okay with. And this is the fastest growing product in the space. This is the same volume. This weighs a lot less.
Yeah.
It's the same volume. It's the same volume. Ours is a little bit wider and a little bit squatter because users said any tenth of an inch or a tenth of a millimeter of height you can take out means less catching on clothing or door frames or whatever. And so that's what we tried to do. But as I've constantly reminding people, this is all you need to have our product, but you don't get this without a second cell phone. So
You have to have a second cell phone for that.
yeah, you have to have a second cell phone an Omnipod has no button on it. You have to have a second device to manage it. Now Omnipod Insulet's management will tell you, well, that's not true, Jeb. We've now got the FDA to buy into using your own cell phone, and that's true, with the following proviso. The FDA insists on approving your operating system and your individual handset. And the length of time it takes to approve an individual handset means that you will never get the first generation device. So yes, you could keep your own cell phone as long as you're willing to trade in your iPhone 15 for a Samsung S22 and that has your phone number, but where the apps never update, which means they gradually stop working.
Which means you need another phone.
Which kind of means that you probably want another phone, right? Like the FDA, the reason the FDA does that isn't that they're just being jerks.
No, I understand.
It's for two reasons. One is they've seen enough episodes of Homeland. They're worried that someone could use your phone to hack your pump and kill you.
Yeah.
But more reasonably and more commonly, that an automatic systems update could brick your pump without you being aware of it.
You know it, right?
Yep. And so that's why they won't allow it.
Yep, that makes total sense to me. Yes, you need it.
I agree.
All right, Jeb. Listen, I'm glad we did this. Anything you feel as though I missed?
No, I think we've comprehensively covered it and done it, and happened to have thrown in a nice refresher on what our base value proposition is too.
Right. It's a story that I think people really should start putting on their radar. And if you know somebody that is dealing with diabetes and isn't on a pump, probably right now would be a good time to start educating themselves on the product that you offer, right?
I think, it's funny you say that, because in talking, I have a good friend who's in his early 30s now, who's on a Tandem T-Slim, and he wears a Dexcom, and he says that one of the biggest things that kept him from adopting a pump for a long time was there's this crowd of people who are like, what do you mean you're not on a pump? Like, let me tell you, let me educate you about all the different features that you're missing out on by having a pump. And he said he's very tech savvy and type A personality. He's like, I just didn't want to be like those people. I mean, just because going back to my base point, there are people for whom managing their diabetes is a major sidelight to their life.
Right.
And I applaud them for doing it. They're very concerned about their health. And, in the same way that I'm sure, and this might be you, this might be someone in your life who, feverishly checks the mock fantasy football draft 3 months before training camp opens. And that's fine. That's a level of engagement that some people have, but there are a whole bunch of other people who are like, you know what? I'll let my team be auto drafted, and I might make 2 roster changes in the course of the season, but I'm participating and I'm getting some portion of the benefit because I'm enjoying myself. And I think that's kind of the category of user that we're most likely to get.
Yeah. All right, Jeb.
Okay.
Yep. We'll hopefully it won't be as long. It shouldn't be as long. I mean, maybe when you have another development, we'll update everybody, and just keep in mind that the length of this of the response has nothing to do with whether or not you are fearful of getting approval. It's just
length of response is not highly correlated to our perceived difficulty of the questions. We might be wrong, but that's our feeling.
Okay.
Based on reading, based on knowing what the questions are.
Thank you for coming in and doing this.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate all the time.
Thanks for tuning in to another CEO interview here at Alpha Wolf Capital. Today we had Jeb Besser from Modular Medical Devices, ticker symbol MODD. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Those things are extremely important to us here at Alpha Wolf, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Capital wish you the very best of success.